welcome to Shooting the Shit on Bank Holiday Monday. We were not supposed to do one of these today, but we thought, you know what? We don't seem to have done very many recently, do we? So let's jump on and do one, so to speak. We were also supposed to be joined by Chloe, but Chloe's had to go and pick her mum up from the hospital. So Chloe, I hope your mum's okay. She's had a bit of a car accident. So you're stuck with us three. But that's good, isn't it? So we are here today to talk about books.
Yay.
Because we are absolutely, well, all three of us are massive book fans. We are all massive readers. Yes, exactly.
Jo's like a Tory politician and got a bookshelf behind her.
Okay, yeah, you need a big Union Jack flag, Jo, and then you can join in with the Tory politics. Yeah, I'm letting the crowd down. None of my books are on show here. So basically, I mean, I did English literature for my degree. I'll just slip that in there now. But I've always loved books, and I will literally read anything except romance fiction. I'm not a massive fan of romance fiction, and I've read a couple, but not a lot. Hannah, you were coming at us with some of the book chat before, and literally all of your offerings that you had were from the 1800s. Whereas Jo, you are an actual, or you were an IRL publisher. You are now an editorial coach, so you help other people get published, don't you? So first of all, Jo, tell me about that. Tell me about your job and what you do.
What I do now or what I did before?
Well, both. Tell us both. Why,
okay.
What in publishing?
So I worked for 16 years at the global best-selling publisher of romance books, which are known in the UK for publishing Mills and Boon romances. They are a global publisher. Those books are translated into hundreds of languages around the world. So yeah, I was full in the thick of romance publishing for all of those years. So yeah, it is my specialist topic. If this was Mastermind, I'd be like, come on at me. And so I worked in the editorial department as well. So I edited the books, was involved with the strategy, very close knit with the authors. And no, they are not just churned out by a computer. They are real people who write these books, mainly women. So yeah, that was my background.
Yeah, I think that's really important because, you know, Hannah and I have fully admitted we have come at this from quite a snobby angle, and it's really interesting. In the group chat beforehand, everything we were saying, you were like, well, actually, no, it's a bit more nuanced than that. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to hearing it from the other side, because I think it's fair to say a lot of people have a snobby view of kind of romance novels and all the rest of it, and look down the nose at it, don't they? Hannah, what about you? Do you read romance novels?
No. I just want to say as well, Jo, you're like super romantic, aren't you? Like you love, like you love marriage, you love love, and like that is totally your bag, isn't it? And it's not for me. Like it's not. I have read romance books. But as Rach said, Jane Eyre is one of my favourite books, and I would call that a romantic book. And Lady Chatterley's Lover is another. You know, I just love D.H. Lawrence really, and there's romance throughout his books. Although Jane Austen can go and get in the bin. Sorry. So you know, I have read romance books. I know. I'm sorry, Jo. I'm sorry. I just can't be doing. They just go to each other's houses all the time. Yeah,
actually we should like them for that reason. That should be one of the that's literally all we do.
Yeah.
I think it's really important though, because Jo was saying, again, when we were having our chat before, Jo was saying that the definition, well, you tell us, Jo, what is the definition of a romance novel?
Okay, so a romance novel, I mean, romance with a capital R, is a story that is driven by the central romance, and there needs to be a happy resolution to that central romance. So you get a lot of books which have romantic elements or can be classed as romantic fiction, but anything that doesn't have a satisfying happy ending to that central couple is not a romance. So your Jojo Moyes, your Nicholas Sparks, they're always like heartbreak, aren't they? So yes, they've got romances in them, they're romantic fiction, but they are not romance with a capital R. That's the distinction.
And that's really interesting. Yeah, because like Hannah, we were saying Jane Austen. I'm not a massive fan. Kirsty, hi Kirsty,
Sorry,
she's watching.
Kirsty.
Kirsty is a massive Jane Austen fan. I'm kind of not. She's a little bit insipid for me. Although I like her more the older I get. But we think back those books that Hannah's just mentioned, like Lady Chatterley's Lover and Jane Eyre, even. Some of those that we think of as the kind of classic romance novels, by that definition, they don't have a happy ending. Everybody dies and everybody's miserable, and then they turn into a ghost, and all sorts of things. But nobody's happy, are they?
Well, even like the romance isn't like Jane Eyre. The romance isn't pivotal, really.
No.
So yeah, I've read a Marianne Keyes on a plane. Nearly threw myself out of it.
Yes, yeah, I've read a Marianne Keyes. Do you know what? I've read a couple of Marianne Keyes, and I actually enjoyed one of them. So
they are compelling. You can read them. You can just eat them up, can't you? And
it's
they
good
are
holiday fiction. Good holiday fiction. Yeah.
She won't read any male authors. I heard an interview about Marianne Keyes, and she won't read a male author.
I was listening to that actually. Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so we know what a kind of romance novel is. Hannah, you threw a fact at us just before we came live about the people who read romance novels. Tell us your fact.
Yeah, I don't think it's surprising that 84% of romance readers are women, and it is just a $1 billion industry. And I think what we were talking about in the group chat and we've seen on the Facebook chat, and the reason that we're doing this is, why is it such a female-centric market, and why is it derided so much when actually there's nothing, if we just take out the snobbery, what is it about romance novels that make it, women for women? For a certain type of woman.
That's the absolute heart of what we're talking about today. I class myself as a feminist, and if you ask me to read a romance novel, I'm going to go, I don't want to read that. Oh, I want to read Margaret Atwood. I want to read something. And I was saying before, there is an element of I'm not really interested in other people's sex lives. I'm quite interested in my own, but that's about it. I don't need to read about other people doing it or think about other people having sex. I know what happens. That's basically it. But then I thought deeper than that. Actually, I think I don't like the bad language. The fact that it's poorly written. That's the bit that I don't like. But am I just making an excuse? So as a feminist, we often look down on romance novels, and yet, Joe, as you just said, most of them are read by women. Most of them are written by women. This is a real. I know you said most of the people on your team were women. This is a female-driven industry, isn't it?
It is, and that's something to be celebrated, not something for us to get our knickers in a twist about. Books by women, written by women for women, is an empowering thing. And I think that, let's put one side, snobbery, because it is for women and by women, is usually at the root of it. What drives me nuts is that snobbery is also driven by women themselves, which I'm like, come on. But actually, you can learn a lot from romance novels through the years, how they've changed, how they show the change in sexual politics, how it changed in sexual dynamics between the heterosexual relationship. There's a lot in there. Plus, it's an outlet for women to be independent financially. It's something they could do at home without going out to work and earn a living. There's so much that's positive about these being written by women for women.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Sorry. And I agree with that, Joe, but it could be argued that it's a patriarchal construct, though, that says that women want to read stories, and they are typically heterosexual, and it is typically, a woman pursuing a man, or a man, they are pursuing each other, and then they're fulfilled and they live happily ever after. Is it not a patriarchal to say that is kind of at the nub of what a woman wants to read about and what a woman wants to happen in their life?
Okay, so it can go two ways, right? So you could say we're being told what we want, but this is, as you say, it's $1 billion industry. Who are we to question what a woman wants to read about and dictate what they should or shouldn't read about? I think it's empowering that, so what? If I want to disappear for 2 hours and read a romance novel and escape into it, how is that me being sucked into the patriarchy? I am an intelligent woman who knows the difference between fantasy and reality. So I might want to escape into a fantasy. Doesn't mean I want it in real life. And there's always this sort of this belief that fiction somehow has to be a direct correspondence to reality. Doesn't make for interesting reading, does it? And I just think that snobbery towards romance, it undermines the intelligence of the women who both write it and read it.
I think the other thing as well is it's that thing of, actually, this isn't all the consuming. You know, I read a really wide range. I read the classics, and I read police procedurals and an Agatha Christie, but just because people are reading a Mills and Boon doesn't mean a Mills and Boon is all they're reading. Like you say, it might be escapism for that short period of time when they're like, and it's like, it might be a complete guilty pleasure. You know, I watch Poirot's as a guilty pleasure. I know it's trash. You know, I know all of that. Whether I'm reading a book or watching the television, I know it's just kind of mindless thing. But I'll generally read that because I've just read something serious and I want a bit of a break, or I've done something serious and I want a bit of a break. So, you know, again, it's that, it is really dismissive, isn't it, to say it's just trash. Yeah,
and it's almost like saying, well, everything on TV is crap, right? Is that within the realm of romance, there's some stories that still have that very classic dynamic that isn't as palatable to a 21st century reader, for example. But then there's still readers who enjoy that. And that doesn't mean in their life they are passive or they might be the strongest women ever. That the reason why they want to read that type of dynamic is because life's just hard, and they just want to have a bit of escapism. So why do we come at it as a point of view, as if to say, well, that's wrong? No, it's entertainment at the end of the day.
Do you know what? I used to, my friend's mum, she still is a nurse, and she worked night shifts. She worked at Wigan Royal Infirmary. She was, a ward sister. So she was a really high up, well-respected kind of nurse prescriber job. And she read that Mills and Boon. She read Mills and Boon all the time. And when I found it, I was like, oh, but why? Like, and I really kind of was like, but I thought you were an intelligent woman. And she was like, it's just a book, love.
It's just entertainment.
I read the Bella or the Woman's Weekly,
It's like saying, if you enjoy watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians, or was it the Australian Marriage? It's like, well, I thought you would only watch proper documentaries and well thought out HBO dramas. It's like we're so much more complex than that. It's what entertains you. And during my years where I had the privilege of working and speaking to not only the people who write the books, but as a company, Mills and Boon has a very good relationship, more so than most publishers, with their readership. And I have listened to stories that have brought me to tears because of the power of those books have given people at specific points in their life. So I remember giving a writing workshop at a big conference, romance writing conference. They exist, they do, and they're fabulous. And it came to the open Q&A at the end, and a woman lifted her hand up and just quite emotionally said, I just want to thank you all. These books, when my mum was like on her deathbed and she just wanted some joy, I just used to read her the books. And it kept us going, because there is depth in the books, there's emotion in the books, but there's that comfort that it's always going to end well. And isn't that a beautiful thing?
Do you know what? And that's a really good point. So Kirsty's made a similar point. She says she reads Marion Keyes and Leon Moriarty, and I've read what's that other woman, Martina Cole, as well. And I know she's not a romance writer, but they have this kind of veneer of cotton candy and sugar and pinkness and what have you, but actually they are tackling really deep issues within that. So those women, yes, they're having a romance and blah blah blah, but at the same time they might be going through chemotherapy, or their partner might have died, or something. So again, it is completely snobbery, isn't it, to say that just because it is a romance novel, it doesn't mean that they aren't tackling deeper issues. And actually they might be able to tackle that. I was listening to, in fact, to the woman who writes Call the Midwife the other day. She was on, fortunately, podcast, Hannah, and she was saying that the reason she thinks that Call the Midwife can tackle a lot of the problems is because it is packaged in this lovely soft Sunday night family viewing kind of package. So they can go into backstreet abortions, and they can go into the domestic abuse and the pill and all that kind of things, because everybody knows there's going to be a happy ending and it's going to be dealt with sensitively. So I do think that's a point worth not worth dismissing, isn't it?
Yeah. Can I also make a statement? And well, kind of a lot of the criticism aimed at romance is usually by people who have not read them or not read them recently and just have a perception of what they are.
Yeah.
So, you know, about the power dynamics between the couple. Well, you know, there's going to be books where you don't enjoy that power dynamic, and there's going to be books where you know, within romance, where that power dynamic is perhaps more suited to what you feel a relationship should be. And again, that's all personal preference. But I would also say in a romance, yes, there's, and I am talking particularly about heterosexual romances, so the hero and the heroine, yes, the couple ends up together, but that doesn't mean because a woman ends up with a man that she somehow succumbed to the patriarchy, because it's her choice. And usually if there's an alpha male in there, the joy and the experience, and the romance readers will know this, that the power is then that it's the heroine that brings him to his knees. She's got power over him. He's not got power over her. It might play out that way, but fundamentally, he was a guy who would not commit, yet she is the only one to make that happen. It's a fantasy, but it's not a domination at the end. If anything, usually the heroine is in the position of power, or there's at least an equaling out of it by the end. But so it's much more nuanced than what it appears in the tropes.
But it's a sexual power. It's the whole story again, that women can only get power through sexuality, that we can't be powerful because of, you know, anything else that we've got going. If a woman is bringing a man to her knees, who, you know, metaphorically or literally, I don't know, then because he wants to, you know, ultimately have sex with her and breed with her and marry her and have her and, you know, whatever, is it not just the same old trope of a woman is only valued for what's between her legs?
No, because it's the journey is much more nuanced. What you've described is what a stereotypical view of a novel is, without understanding actually what goes within it. There is, every good character-driven story will be driven by emotional conflict. So there's a lie that the character tells themselves. They're not worthy of love. There is something that's happened, and an emotional change happens. Yes, you could be reading a romance that has a lot of sex in it and has sexual dynamics at play, or you might be reading a romance that is, you know, there's even a brand of romance called clean romance, where there is no sex whatsoever. But that's what a romance reader is reading for the emotional journey of the individuals. So it's not in relation. By the end of it, that heroine will be strong with or without that guy. They've been on a journey. They're both stronger, better people by the end of it. It's just they've chosen to be together.
Right.
Yeah, because that is the thing, and you're right. You know, I haven't read enough to comment, but that's the thing that worries me as well. It's this idea that women can change men, and that's what I think. You know, is that what we want to be teaching people? Because that's why women end up. You know, and
that's why it is fantasy.
Well, yes, I know, but then do we perpetuate that by having it in there? So there's a couple of things I want us to move on. So. First thing, I mean, we were having a conversation in the chat this week about two novels, two novel previews that have popped up on my timeline, and both of them were very much, I'm talking about the imagery now rather than the actual wording. It was both very much the kind of weeping, delicate woman and the big, strong, tattooed warrior kind of man. And I did do a quick Google of kind of typical romance cover art before we came on, and it's very much that trope of the kind of big strong man and the small weeping woman. And I get what you're saying about, you know, we go on a journey, they go on a journey, they grow, the man is tempered and blah blah blah, and that is what we want to happen. But do you never just get sick as a publisher of doing that same old bloody romantic fiction covers and just go, for fuck's sake, can we not just have her in a bloody business suit? And can he not be wearing a snuggly onesie for once? This is ridiculous.
Or like Billy Cooper, it's all jodhpurs and riding crops.
Yeah, and it's all jodhpurs and a bum.
It's marketing. Well, but there is, again, you're talking to a very specific type of romance novel. okay? And romance novels they're like sweeties, right? You just want to you gobble them up and you put them aside, and that's why you see so many Mills and Boon often in charity shops. They publish about 60 new books every month. There's a huge appetite for these books. So when you're choosing your Mills and Boon or your category romance book, you don't need to be messing around trying to understand the nuances of what that story's about. If you want to read an alpha male who's tattooed up, you know, you want it in the book on the cover, and it's a shortcut. It's like going supermarket shopping. You don't want to stand there for ages and go, oh God, they've changed the colour of my favourite brand of baked beans again. You just want to know. So the cues are not subtle. The tropes are up there in your face, and it works.
Yeah, well, and do you know what as well? You know, as I was looking at them, I thought I was kind of getting annoyed with it, and then I thought, well, actually, you know, like I said, I read a lot of crime fiction, and that's, you know, if it's an Ian Rankin, you know, it's going to be a black and white picture of an Edinburgh street with some fog coming over it. If it's an Agatha Christie, it's going to have a dagger on the front. You know, again, it's marketing, isn't it? And it's obvious, and you know what you're going to get. You don't need to think about it. And we do judge books by their covers, don't we?
Yeah. And another thing that's very common in romance books as well is the titles aren't very subtle. They'll tell you the tropes right up front. And I'm sure those ones did as well. So it's marketable. It's marketing.
Yeah. But I mean, Hannah, I know you've said you haven't read a lot of fiction, but you have read a lot of romance fiction, but you have read a lot of kind of the classics, and as you say, like D.H. Lawrence. So you've read a lot of the kind of classics from the 18th and early 19th century, the D.H. Lawrences from the early 20th, and then a kind of Marion Keyes. Do you see from that kind of viewpoint of literature that the way that women are written about is changed, or does it just seem like the kind of same tropes keep coming up time and time again?
Yeah, it's the same, and I'll have to move us away from romance because, as I've admitted, I don't have a lot of experience with it, and you know, I'm coming at it from an ignorant perspective. But the way
I also don't want this to be just us going to Joe, they're not feminists, and Joe going, they are feminists.
But thinking about the way, so I do kind of not exclusively, but predominantly read male authors, and that's just, I don't know why. But I've stopped reading Stephen King and I love horror as a genre, and I did used to love Stephen King, but I just cannot I just can't read another story where a woman is either a sex object or a victim. And you know, I think about people like D.H. Lawrence, who was just a wonderfully sensitive author and wrote about women in such a wonderfully sensitive way, and men, and you know, the kind of emotions of them. And then when you compare that to someone like Stephen King, who writes about, you know, women as victims or sex objects, like literally as sex objects.
Do you really mean Stephen King?
I do mean Stephen King. Who am I saying?
No, it's all right. It's just because I read him and I've never, ever seen him through that lens.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, well, we'll talk about that in a minute then. We'll talk about that when we're off this, because that's interesting. Yeah. So
I've seen plenty of other crime writers through that lens, massively, but not, that's just, anyway, aside.
Yeah, no, but it's true. Like lots and lots of crime writers, it is the women that are the victims, or you know, they're just there as the sidekick or the sex symbol. So I don't know that it's particularly the attitudes have changed, or if it's just the author, really. And I think, you know, society has obviously changed, and what's acceptable has changed. But when, you know, the Brontes were writing about very strong women who were subjugated by their time period, and I think that's what authors are still writing about today. I just think it's the society that's changed, not the way that the women are being depicted.
It's interesting. I did my dissertation on how African American women were perceived through slavery. So I did Zora Neale Hurston's The Eyes Watching God, which was written in the early 20th century. Then I did The Colour Purple, which was written in the middle. And then I did another book, which for the time being I can't remember, which was written fairly recently. But it was basically 3 books from the beginning, middle, and end of the 20th century. And the upshot was that actually the way all of those 3 books depicted women that were in slavery was pretty similar. Very little had changed to the way that their stories were told. It was Maya Angelou, actually.
I know why the cage bird sing.
But it was the same story, even though they were kind of 30 years apart. The way that the women were portrayed was exactly the same, but those were books written by women. And I've done a lot of feminist fiction is kind of my thing. So I've read a lot of books that are written by women about women, and those stories have not changed. Those books that are, if you think back to The Well of Loneliness by Radcliffe Hall at the beginning of the 1920s, wasn't it? That book, the way she wrote about women was pretty much the same, and same struggles, same stories, same voices, and everything as what you're getting now. And the narrative hasn't moved on. And I don't know whether that's just women. Is that just the way we are? I don't know. But because Joe, you were saying you feel like the way women write about women in romance has changed. So
I would say specifically, when it comes to romance, yes, and that is because society has allowed us to do different things. So it has allowed the dynamic to be different. So, the classic tropes of the secretary and the boss, like she's the boss now. So you see that difference. There is more expectation from the heroine that she's not just going to be the little woman who stays at home because she's got her, she's married, she's got her guy. No, she's in a different position she's in a position of power. She can do whatever the hell she wants. So in that way, the way that we've seen society has changed hugely, even from the 70s to now. I know we've still got a long way to go. It is reflected in those stories, which are fundamentally by women, for women. So you see them out the household, you see them in the workplace, you see them choosing not to have children. There is, you see them talking about their sexuality. Let's not forget that. People get all a bit icky and funny. Like, you might not want to read about, that might not be your thing to read sex, but it's flipping empowering that women can write explicit sex and women just say, you know what, I want to read that. So you might not like it, but that is a change as well. That, books that would have been considered pornographic, wouldn't have been, allowed to see the light of day. They're readily available for women to write and to read and to enjoy. And it's still with a stigma, but it's hugely moved on in that way.
But and we're back to the point that romance is the bastion of the feminist movement, because actually, for the first time in the history of literature and the canon and stuff, women have been able to. I just want to come quickly. So Kirsty's made a point about the difference being intersectionality, and I do think that's a really important point to make. I suspect that the vast majority of romance fiction is heteronormative. I also assume that there is gay romance fiction. Do male or female gay people read a lot of that? It must. I suspect the biggest proportion of the audience is women reading about affairs with men.
Yeah, so there is, if you can think of any permutation of anything in romance, there will be a subgenre for it. And actually, there's a huge, very vibrant publishing on male-male romance. But interestingly, the target audience and the main audience for male-male romance is women, and they're usually written by women and women. So it's
that's really interesting. Why? Why is that?
So a couple of things. So one is thought that sometimes you're either a mirror or a window when it comes to what you read. You either want to see it mirrored, or you want to see it, that's me, that's like me, or you want a window, which is I'm going to see how other people live. So you're probably more of a window reader if you want to experience that. What's interesting about male-male romance is that it may not often be a true representation of a male-male relationship. It's more of a heteronormative take on it. That's a whole other subgenre thing that I find really fascinating. But there are gay romances out there. I will say it's not my specialism to talk. My experience has mainly been in heterosexual relationships, but it's not as booming a market. But we are seeing more and more, and I'd say again, the romance industry, there's been a lot of controversy, but they're picking up their heels about increasing inclusivity and diversity across the board. So in terms of sexuality, genders, disabilities, and just the whole range of body positive. For a long time, all you would see is a skinny white girl and a buff white guy in a cover, that is starting finally, thank goodness, to change as the industry catches up.
That's
and
really
I suppose it's the same in rom-coms as well, isn't it? Films, it is becoming slightly more inclusive, but not very. It's not very often that you'd see a fat lass and a skinny lad, or into a mixed
or a size 12
race.
girl.
Yeah,
What's that, fat lass?
I know.
Can I just say, I've seen that Kirsty, who I'm loving all Kirsty's comments, by the way, has just flagged up that she loves Amish romances.
Friend loves Amish romance.
Yeah, in Canada. So Amish romances are massive in North America, particularly along. It's a whole specific subgenre. We don't really translate into other countries, not really taken off, but that is a subgenre in North America.
Again, that's that whole notion of it is romancing the Amish culture, isn't it? And so we're saying, they live without television and they live without electricity. It's like going back to Little House on the Prairie times, and like, imagine how forgetting that they must be cold and wet and die of diseases fairly commonly. But it's that kind of having that romantic, idyllic, pastoral period right here, right now in the modern world. So I can kind of see that. Yeah.
Now, is it fetishizing people though? So like the Amish, it's a culture. It's got religion attached to it. It's a way of life for generations. Is it fetishizing? And I'm saying that right.
Yeah, I think it probably depends on the execution of it. If it's done sensitively, I don't think we'll be talking about those forbidden Amish stories where, there's a member of the Amish community goes against their beliefs to, go to the outside world. It is, fiction is fiction. And like I was saying, it's like a window into another world. So, if it's done sensitively, you're looking into a fictionalized experience of a different way of living. That's what we do every time we pick up a book in some ways.
Is it written by Amish people?
No.
You see, is that not a problem in itself then, that it's, it's a window looking into
then we're getting into cultural appropriation.
We are a bit,
which is a whole other,
it's a whole other story. So though I was reading a statistic the other day, actually, they was talking about because Val McDermid is always accused of being, excessively violent. I've read every one of Val McDermid's books. They are not excessively violent in the slightest. But there, she was saying that there is research that says people who it's part of the kind of human psyche, and if you act out violent thoughts, if you are allowed to fantasize about doing things wrong and transgressing, you will not actually do them in real life. And people who play violent video games or watch violent films or read these kind of romance novels or whatever, it is that escape route, isn't it? It's like, I can do this in my mind. I don't need to have that fantasy and play it out in real life, because I can just imagine it. And that's a uniquely human experience, isn't it?
I wonder if that's why things like 50 Shades became so... I think 50 Shades was also clever marketing, that everyone was like, what's this about? Why is everyone... Plus, there was a lot of tittering about it, wasn't there? But I wonder if that's why things like 50 Shades were so massive,
but
which I also haven't read.
I do want us to come on to 50 Shades, because I haven't read it. I have read some of those articles that talk about how awful the writing is. And this is one of the things that I want to talk about. I did a quick search before we came on about some of the awful things that are written in romance novels, or like worst quotes from books or trashy books, and just Google some of those folks, because there are some bloody hilarious things. And particularly 50 Shades of Grey has some appalling writing in it. But Joe, I said this on the chat and you came straight back at me with, well, that's bad editing, or of course there are going to be bad books that are published, but there's 5 times as many well-written romance novels. So how do you dispel that stereotype that gets thrown at you as well?
Well, first of all, self-publishing has completely revolutionized publishing as we know it. So there are books that are available that will not have seen an editor. Okay. But there are also some self-published books can also be incredibly well written, well edited, and all of those things. It's hard to distinguish until you buy it and you read it. So that's one thing I want to say. But also, let's use 50 Shades of Grey as an example. that was written, the origins were that it was fan fiction. It was a fan fiction take on Twilight. It got posted on a forum. It got traction. It got a readership. It got fans excited. Then publishers paid attention, bought her, published her, right? I actually went to a talk with E.L. James. It was huge. It was like this, I can't remember where it was in London, but it was a packed, with people who were fans. And she actually talked about the fact she wished she'd had chance for it to be edited before it went to print. She never wrote that book with the aim for it to be a multi-published global success, you know, and she knows that it needed a good stern edit. She's very honest about that. But, you know, at the end of the day, the bad writing or the lack of a strong edit did not stop that book being a global sensation, because there was something in the story and the characters and, you know, the titillation that compelled people to read it. So, you know, whether you love it or hate it, that is an example of how, you know, you don't have to be the best writer if you've got a good story and it's compelling. You can transcend that.
But then, so this leads us on to another conversation that we were having, because you don't, that by itself really annoys me. You don't have to be the best writer. You just have to have a good story. Now, to me, if you're going to be a published author, you have to have a good story and you have to have good characters, but you also need to be fairly good at writing, because I know there are so many writers that don't even get that far and they are exceptional. And again, then you were saying, well, actually, that's the middle-aged white men's fault. That's the fault of the patriarchy.
The gatekeeper. Then you come to the gatekeeper, right, which is why the self-published route can work so well for people. You know, that if you've got a good story, to be a good writer, I would argue first and foremost you need to be a really good storyteller, and you have to have a really good grasp of character and all of that. And then, you know, good editors will help you. You know, I know that's what I do, and I'm very passionate about that. So a good editor can add that veneer on. And I have worked with writers who are just pure emotion and story, and it's compelling, but, you know, like, need the hell editing out of them before it goes to print. So I understand what you're saying, that, you know, it annoys you that some books make it through that could have had a bet, you know, weren't, well, every book that gets published, whether it's traditionally published or self-published, is not going to be fantastic literature. It's just not. It's not how the world works.
It's true. I mean, I used to, I was going to create, well, I did briefly create a publishing company. So I went to a kind of few publishing conferences, and you saw that in action. You know, I read kind of manifestos by writers that wanted to get published and couldn't get anybody, and they were bloody brilliant. And then you saw some other books that had been published, and you were just like, oh my God, man, that's awful. But Hannah, you were saying before, tell us about how you choose which books you're going to read. And then, Joe, you tell us why that's problematic.
Yeah, so I am an enormous snob, and I don't really like delving into the depths of trash very often in what I read or in what I watch or anything. So
children. You're not allowed anything with children in with Hannah. She always asks me for book recommendations. She's like, "What did you read recently? It's good." I was like, "Oh, I've got these 10 books." It's like, "Have any of them got children in that get hurt?"
Children that die. Yeah, I can't stand children that die or animals that die. So I tend to read books, either what Rachel tells me I should be reading, or what I find on not bestseller lists, on prize lists. So books that have been nominated for prizes, or books that have won prizes. And I don't read books that are, you know, the Sunday Times bestseller, the Amazon bestseller, the Tesco's bestseller, because I think that bestseller lists are just like paid for spots by editors, and you know, they just kind of buy a load of books online and then they're the Amazon bestseller or whatever. So that I was telling Joe, that's how I pick books, based on whether or not they've been nominated for something, you know, worthwhile. And Joe went, well, then you're only reading what white men tell you to read. I was like, God damn it, I can't do anything.
We cannot escape the patriarchy anywhere.
Well, I did enjoy that, my little comeback there. So I will say, so as an industry though, publishing does have quite a lot of women in it, right? But they're not always maybe at the top making the decisions. So definitely, obviously, I was a very niche publisher, so it made sense that most of us were women. But I also worked as part of a larger publisher, HarperCollins, and I would say the majority of the editors still there were women. But when it comes to sort of decision making, like, you know, don't assume because something's made it to a bestseller list that it hasn't, you know, there's a load of politics involved. There's the discussions in the publishing houses of who we're going to put forward, who we're going to get behind, and why is that? And there's a million of different reasons why you want to get behind a certain, hopefully because it's a good book. And usually at the root of it, there is a passionate editor who's like, I really believe in this book. And then you've got to look at the judges. Who are the judging panels of that particular you know, award? You know, are they? And I do think there is better mix now, again, with diversity and inclusivity across panels. But, you know, just be mindful of that you're having your list curated for you by, you know, other people, that it's not always just about the best book. It's like, oh my word, we've paid this author a massive advance. It's got to earn out. So we've got to get it on all the lists. We've got to get it out there quick.
They are still, you know, when you look at the Booker Prize, even, you know, the Whitbread Prize and all the rest of them, they're still majority white, if not majority male, in terms of who's judging them. And even if you go to the more kind of niche book literature prizes, they're still going to be quite prejudiced in terms of who they are. I mean, my Aunt Jennifer always used to buy me the Booker shortlist, so 6 books each year. And then I started myself getting the long list, which did get me a kind of a wider variety as well. But again, even if you go down to kind of Black women's literature and, you know, what's the word? I've forgotten the word for not being straight. Anyway, never mind, that word's gone. But you know, those kind of lesser, more niche book prizes, they're still, as you say, they're still curated by people with a certain mindset. There will be an agenda as to why that book has got there. There will be money behind the publishing house and marketing and all the rest of it that's enabled it to get there. So you're still never getting, you know, a truly diverse and reflective list, are you?
Yeah, and that has just totally ruined it for me. Now that was a penny dropped, and that was a real like, oh fuck moment. Now what do I do? And now I am genuinely worried that I'm gonna waste my life reading shite books because I can't not finish a book. Is anyone else like that? If I start a book, no matter how awful it is, fucking Middlemarch, no matter how awful it is, I have to finish it. I slogged through about 45 hours of bloody Middlemarch.
You know what? Recently, and I do mean recently, like within the past 5 years, I started an awful book not that long ago, and it was about, well, I thought it was a book about domestic abuse, but it was written by a man, and it was, the main character was the man, and he basically kept his wife locked in a basement, and it was his story rather than hers, and it was just so relentingly awful. I thought, I just cannot finish it. So very rarely I will abandon one, but it's something I recently found.
The only book that I've recently, I think, abandoned was a Virginia Woolf. What's that one about? The lighthouse.
The
lighthouse.
Yeah. Oh my God. I cannot read Virginia Woolf. She just does my head in. It's like sitting with a pissed person and just having them ramble at you.
Stream of consciousness. Yeah. So I mean, I have to finish a book. But
you have to.
Yeah. But also the way to find books, as I was also saying, is like there's so much availability, and you know, personal recommendation is thought of to be one of the main reasons that people find books. But I'll talk to you offline about this. But I've got an idea to help you, Rachel. Oh, sorry, Hannah. Rachel's all right. She's just whatever. Hannah needs some help. Really good about her books, and help choosing them. But yeah, you don't want to be wasting time when you haven't got much time to, you know, read.
That's it. Kirsty's just said she abandons books because life is short. And somebody else who I don't know who it is, but they're saying they've got 3 books on the go. I don't know, Hannah. Are you a multi-reader? Can you read more than one book at a go?
Not usually, but I am at the moment. So I've got a non-fiction, which I've only just started getting into, and a fiction on the go. So yeah, I am doing it at the moment.
I can mix fiction and I can mix fiction and non-fiction, but I can't read two fictions at the time.
Do you know what I've done? And it's a big mistake. So I've recently read 3 just boring police procedurals, and then what I realized, so I read the first one and I thought, I think I'd prefer this as an audio book, but I'd started the second one, so I had to finish it. So I went onto my Audible to look for it. I've listened to it. I've not only bought it, I've already listened to it. So I read it. This is how disposable this book is. I hadn't remembered that I'd already listened to it. Then I read it. Now I've listened to it again. But now I'm on book 3 in book form, and I'm on book 2 in Audible form, and that is just confusing the shite out of me. I'm going to have to abandon this plan altogether because it's crap. But no, I'm a 1 book at a time girl. We are going to have to.
6.
I know, 6 on the go. I think that's just appalling. It's just, I think, just get out, because that's not normal for anybody.
Shall we just finish by saying what are you reading at the moment, or say your favourite ever book?
Give us a book recommendation, Joe. Give us a good one. But if we wanted to start, and you've got a recommendation of a fiction book, a romance fiction that is good, where are we going to start? That's going to convince us to read more.
Oh my word! I'm like proper on the spot.
Look, just read the bloody book.
I don't know. Oh, I've finished reading this recently. It was nice.
What's that? The something cottage by the sea.
It was a very enjoyable romance. Took me to Cornwall. It had enough emotional conflict to keep me interested. There was enough crafting going on. Just made me feel like
Okay.
But that's just happens to be one that's I've finished recently, so it's actually just here.
Well, I mean, I have absolutely sprung this on you, so please put that in the comments box afterwards, and then you can direct us to some other ones. Hannah, what is either your book that's your favourite book, or a book that you think you would recommend?
Well, at the moment, I'm reading Shuggie Bain, which is about a Scottish lad growing up in the Glasgow tenements, which is an excellent book, and it won the Booker Prize last year, which is why I read it. But my favourite ever book is Grapes of Wrath.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
I do. Yeah, I like that book. I think my favourite ever book is still Wuthering Heights, because I think the seething hatred in that book is just phenomenal. And yeah, I think it's great. But just too many to mention, actually. Although I tell you what, I recently went back and I reread all of the Charles Dickens books, and I had forgotten how brilliant he is and how funny he is. So if you've never read a Charles Dickens and you're a bit snobby about him and think life's too short and it's too boring, go and read it, because it's really funny. His dialogue is really funny. So yeah, that's it. Right, thank you so much to everybody for watching. Thank you for you two for giving up your Bank Holiday Monday to talk about books. Literally still, so we covered this bit in my notes. We haven't even got to this bit, so again we are going to have to come back and talk about this again. So thank you very much, everybody. We'll be back in 2 weeks time for our
we are back in 2 weeks time, and it is our trans it's our let me say it right, it's gay, bi and trans visibility day of visibility. So we've got a guest joining us who has gone through transitioning herself, and she'll be joining us with her daughter.
Yes, so it's going to be an amazing session. I'm really looking forward to this.
Well,
so yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Bank Holiday Monday. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye. I feel like at the end we